Life partners should have the same goals. The more different the goals and values are, the more challenging the marriage will be. You need to have same goals. If I want to have 4 or 5 children, and the person I want to go out with wants to have 2 children and a pet dog, we have a problem. We're not on the same values. So we're going to get into that a little bit in a few moments. What does it mean to have the same values? We should share the same goals. Another problem could be religious disconnection. If I'm Shomer Shabbat, I hear this all the time, where one of the people is Shomer Shabbat and they're considering dating someone who's totally not. I don't advise this at all, because that's too much of a disconnect, and that creates crises galore. You need to have someone who's somewhat on the same level playing field on your religious levels. What I love about the shidduch system is that you have a person who you can bounce off the relationship to. Typically in the shidduch system, the shadchan sets up the date and then he or she lets it go after 3 or 4 or 5 dates, where now the people are communicating directly. I can't tell you how many wonderful relationships go bust because there isn't that third party that could have helped get that boat out of the pier very carefully. Sometimes people miscommunicate, or there's a misunderstanding, and they decide it's not for me, and a great opportunity is lost. So the great ma'alah, the great benefit of the shidduch system, it allows a third party who's experienced to sort of move things along and fix potential problems that may come up, and so as a result keep it going until it then can make it on its own. I train a lot of people in communicating effectively. So you need to think about what are your values that are important to you. You need to have your story down in a concise, clear fashion. And I'd like to group them by categories. Your family, your parents, what they do, how long they've been married, your siblings, your brothers and sisters, your schools that you attended, time that you devote to the Jewish community, things that you've done, volunteerism, how much you learn, career choice, what you're doing, why you want to do it. Will that career choice allow you to find time for a wife or a husband later on with children? Recreation, what do you enjoy doing for fun? What do you do on your spare time? What's your favorite music? What's your favorite authors? Do you like to travel? Is Eretz Yisrael important to you? Have you been to Israel recently? Have you taken a birthright trip recently? Talk about that. Talk about any chesed projects you're involved in. What are you proud of? How do you handle challenges in life? How do you want to raise children? Would you raise them the same way your parents raised you or differently? You have to configure out your opinions on things. Many people think a good marriage partner is someone to have fun with, feel chemistry, and enjoy romance. While that's important, it's not what's the necessary ingredient in making a great marriage. You're going to have to get into the person's depth. You don't allow your physical impulses to control your rational thinking, which will blind you. It's a mistake to be lured by things like beauty or money. Although physical attraction is necessary, infatuation will wear off and then the real work begins. Now listen to what I'm about to tell you. The right spouse will help you navigate your way through life, and the wrong one will take you down the road that you never intended to travel. So choose carefully. I'll show you now how to choose. Too often people forget to take the long-term picture into account. Love at first sight sounds great, but that's not love. If it seems too good to be true, it is. You got to get to know the person and don't let anyone rush you into that decision. What are you looking for in a life partner? Number 1, personality. Does it connect with you? 2, intelligence. Are they intellectually compatible with you? Financial standing. Does the person have a plan to be able to financially sustain his family? What's his plan? What's he doing for Parnassah? That's critical. How will you pay the bills? Religious values. That should mean something to you. Family background. Check the family out. That's important. Mutual goals and interests. And physical attraction. Marriages are failing today because people are not judging the person with objectivity. Unfortunately, many men and women are drawn to lousy human beings because they have biases, and they consistently get magnetized to that kind of personality. Ask yourself the question, is my attraction towards the person based on an objective appraisal of their true qualities, or am I projecting virtues where there are none and ignoring disturbing character flaws? People close their eyes, unwilling to see what they don't want to see. If you're looking for someone cultured and refined, don't settle for someone who's narrow-minded and crude, who curses every other word. If you're searching for someone who's spiritual, well, don't tolerate someone who talks about money and materialism all the time. If you want a warm, happy, and accepting spouse, don't settle for someone who's depressed, self-centered, or judgmental. Loving that person won't magically erase their bad qualities. On the other hand, just because they have flaws doesn't necessarily mean you have to reject them. So that's why I'm a huge believer of something called the top 10 needs list. The top 10 needs list, I do this with a lot of people, is to create a list of what do I need in a person. Let's say I'm a girl. So 3 things that I tell all girls are musts. Look out for 3 things. If the guy has any of these 3, run the other direction. And I'll tell them to you in Hebrew. Kamtzan, ka'asan, and kaptan. Is he cheap? If the person doesn't spend on you, that's Gehenna. 2, does he have anger issues? Ka'as. And 3, is he inflexible? If a guy has these 3 qualities, beware. Does he have a Rabbi? Does he have a mentor? So that would be on my top 10 list. Is he emotionally balanced? How many cases come to me where they find out after the marriage that there's something cuckoo upstairs? Check into that. Very important. Look for discrepancies in behavior. Look for mannerisms that don't look right. Is he or she a family person? Are they nurturing? Are they kind? Are they considerate? Are they patient? Do they have a sense of humor? And especially important, do they have what we call in Hebrew simchat chayim, or joie de vivre in French, or a zest for life? An optimistic personality. You're going to spend the rest of your life with that person. 30, 40, 50, 60 years, Be'ezat Hashem. You want someone who sees the world as a glass half full, not half empty. Very important. Someone who can pick up the pieces after a fall. Someone, when challenged, dusts himself off the floor and says, you know what? I can do this. I'll rebuild myself. That's very important. You need to have that spirit in an individual. Look for that when you're dating. Search for a friend, someone you can talk to and someone you can confide in. Someone who listens, who tries to understand you and values your opinion. Someone you can trust and someone whose character you admire. Someone with a healthy self-esteem. Be aware for someone who has poor self-esteem, because that's a problem. Someone who also respects your boundaries. I got an email from someone who wrote me from Lakewood. Is it appropriate if my wife looks at all of my private WhatsApp messages every night? I said, I have a serious problem with that. It's not allowed. My wife has a cell phone, I have a cell phone. I don't go looking at her messages. So that's important, because that person respects your boundaries. Look for someone who brings out the best in you and makes you comfortable with yourself. You don't want to just live in marriage. You want to thrive. You want to be the best Jew that you can be. And the person that you marry should motivate you and make you feel great about yourself. You want to be the best individual you can be. You want to be your best you. Will that person motivate you? Will that person show that they believe in you? Will they propel you to the best version of you? Be aware of incongruent behavior, such if they tell you one thing but you see them doing something else. Yeah, I opened the store at 8 o'clock, so why are you bumming around every day at midday? I go to shul every day. How come you're in bed at 10 o'clock in the morning every day? Look for that kind of behavior, incongruent behavior, where what he or she says doesn't match up to the mitziut, to the reality. And look out for avoidant behavior, when they don't want to answer questions, when they don't want to reveal things about themselves, when they duck questions. Critical things that I need to teach you. Ask yourself the following things when you date. Are they extremely sensitive and emotionally needy? That's a problem. Are they complimentary, or they frequently criticize? That's a problem. You want to be criticized the rest of your life? Are they inflexible? Is he or she dominating? Is he or she happy and easygoing, or serious and too intense? Are they positive or cynical? Watch out for a person who believes they're never wrong and who never apologizes for any deed. Examine every aspect of their personality and ego to see, there's that word ego again. Can I live with that person? Do you enjoy each other's company? Are they pleasant to be with? Do you have common interests together? If you say, let's go bowling, did they say, get lost? You some Mars? I'm not doing that. Look for maturity, look for responsibility. A mature person is committed to working at the dating relationship. They're willing to give and share without measuring, you did this for me, or I did this for you, so now you owe me. There's no IOUs. It's unconditional. There's no such thing as keeping score. Does he or she communicate well with you? Do they get you? Do they get what you're saying? When you're with the right person, they get you. You start a sentence, they can finish it. Are they tuned into your needs and feelings? Do they get easily upset or angered? Do they turn small issues into big offenses? Are they considerate? You've been driving all day for 10 hours and they want you to go out at night. But you're exhausted. No, got to go out. Always be aware that any person you marry will have some issues or behaviors that are not exactly to your liking. Little sensitivities can tell a big story. Let's say you go into a restaurant. It's right now August. It's freezing. And you came in with a sleeveless dress. And you're sitting right under the air conditioning vent. Does he offer to give you his jacket? Little things like that. Look for little sensitivities. They make a big difference. Is he or she caring and considerate? Do they notice only what you can do for them or what she or he can do for you? That's very important. Religious beliefs are an important area to explore. Do they preach one thing but do another? Do they study? Do they make time to study? Do they go to class? Are they lax about religious practices that are important to you? I get these questions all the time. Religious girl will call me up, say, I want to go out. He's not really, what does he do on Shabbat? Plays tennis, washes his car. I said, how do you feel? You're going to come out of shul on Shabbat, he's washing the car. Well, I have one on the West Coast, it's a beauty. She walks 3 miles to shul in Las Vegas, and he shows up by car 5 minutes before the Kiddush starts. And they have a miserable marriage. Miserable. The cops have been called in several times. And we're talking about white-collar, multi-million-dollar incomes. We have to make sure that your religious levels are on the same. Are you comfortable with each other's lifestyle? A girl calls me up from Europe, married 6 months, over. The guy that she married had a lifestyle that she wasn't aware of. She's a nice girl, simple girl, but she's not that elaborate. He had to be away for every other Shabbat. He racked up $160,000 of credit card bills on her name. So he had to be away to the 5-star hotels, all in her credit card. So, do you have the same lifestyle expectations? That's important. Lifestyles can differ dramatically, depending on who's responsible for supporting the family. That's important. Does your date get along with your relatives and friends? If people are telling you something about that person, find out why. Why are they saying things against him or he or she? Take that into consideration. Look out and see if there's any dysfunctional relationship in his or her family. Do the parents not get along? How do they treat people? I had a girl who came in with a broken engagement. Beautiful girl. She was engaged. She went over to his house after the engagement, and they live in an out-of-town community. She saw something that shocked her. He had a brother who was autistic, and he kept shushing him at the Shabbat Shabbos table. Stephen, shut up now. Be quiet. And he physically moved him away from the room. He wouldn't allow him to talk. And his mother started to give a Devar Torah. And he says, Mom, we heard it already. You don't have to say it again. The engagement was broken within 4 days. Find out. Be careful. So I had a case in Englewood, New Jersey. Same thing. They got engaged. He refused to let her talk to her mother on the Shabbos table. So things happen. Be on the lookout. Make sure you can love the person the way he or she is, of course, while committing to accepting differences. There'll always be differences. Let me just close with a great story. It was the yortzeit of Rachel Imenu, and many people in Israel like to go to her kever to pray. And in Israel, there's something called tramping, which is catching a lift on the highway. Several Hasidic guys were on the highway, and they were put out their thumbs. A car stopped because Baruch Hashem,
index finger, not their thumbs.
Whatever it is.
It's like
that. In my days, it was this. Okay, now they've changed it. Okay, thank you. Anyway, so a car stops, and they hop into the back, and they're speaking in Yiddish, and they feel uncomfortable speaking in Yiddish while the driver and his friend are Hebrew speaking. So they started they converted over into Hebrew, and they're learning in Kollel. And in Israel, what do the people who are learning Kollel talk about? How will we make the month? You know, we're surviving month to month. And thank God we're just barely making the month. And they're wondering to themselves, will we ever be able to afford apartments? At the rate we're going, we'll never be able to afford apartments. So the man who's driving the car says, you're worried about getting an apartment? Let me tell you my story. And he tells them a story. He goes, I grew up totally secular in Yerushalayim. My father worked for the Israel Broadcasting Authority 9 to 5. But we needed a little extra money. So he moonlighted at night as the wedding hall maitre d' for a wedding hall called Sason V'Simcha Hall in Yerushalayim. Now, if you've gone to a Simcha in Israel, it's a little bit more elaborate than America. I remember when my brother-in-law was bar mitzvah, we went to because my in-laws are Israeli. Anyway, so here's what happens. After a wedding, they bring out the wedding cake. And what they do is they put sparklers on the cake. And they light up the sparklers, and it has an incredible result. Sometimes the candles don't take. So the maitre d', what does he do? He keeps a little bottle of lighter fluid in the back pocket. And what he does is he squirts the sparklers or the candles, and then he lights them and it takes. And it looks beautiful. One night, he rolls out the cake, and he tries to light them, but they're not going. So he has his neat little 1 liter or a small little can. He squirts the cake with the lighter fluid, and unfortunately, the cake goes on fire. Unbeknownst to him are a 10-year-old girl and her friend playing, and they're doing like a hide and go seek thing. Well, our 10-year-old girl runs right into the cake and becomes a ball of fire. People are paralyzed and don't know what to do. Everyone's like in shock. The photographer had some sense. He goes to the table, makes a mad dash, pulls the tablecloth off, the shiner goes flying. He takes the girl and he wraps her and he rolls her on the floor until he douses the fire. But the damage is done. 3rd-degree burns all over her body. And the man who's telling the story says, my father was a decorated IDF officer, is beside himself with guilt, crying. And the girl's whisked off to Hadassah, where he follows with them and he's begging for forgiveness. And the parents say, it's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. They were just playing there. Anyway, she would then be flown off to Paris to a special burn hospital where she would be treated. And he says, as a result of that story, that experience, my father underwent a tshuva. He had a deep think within himself, and he said, why did this happen to me? That began the process of him coming back to religion and eventually becoming religious. And as he tells the story, my father became observant, and my mother, but I and my siblings wanted no part of it. We're not interested in your Judaism, not for me. And so I grew up, I went into the IDF, I served, I came out, I needed a job. I looked around, and I got a job with a company that owned 65 sweet candy and sweet shops called Mitukim Ze Anachnu. Sweets, that's us. And I walked in, and the owner himself was also a Baal Tshuva. He gave me a job in one of the stores. And one day he says to me, you know what? You're not interested in becoming religious, I hear. So you know that cashier? She's a sweet girl. She's like you. She's secular. I'll introduce you to her, and you just start going out with her. You know, it's about time you got married. You're 24 now, 25. So they introduces him to her, and they sort of get together. And they like each other, and they start to date. And now it gets serious. And it's getting ready to proposal time. But he never asked her a question. And he asked her the following question. You know, I don't understand something. You're supposed to be like me, secular, chiloni. I always wondered, how come you dress like you're out of Yerushalayim? Or Bnei Brak? You're fully clothed all the way. And she says, I have to tell you, I'm not religious. But I have 3rd-degree burns all over my body and I have scars. And he turns white as a ghost. He says, did that happen to you at a wedding hall? Yeah. Was that at Sasson V'Simcha Hall a certain number of years before? She says, yeah. He says, I don't know if you want to hear this. I don't know if you're ever going to want to marry me. It was my father that was the maitre d'. And you may never want to speak to me ever again. She says, no. If that happened, it's because God intended it for us to meet. Let's go say hello to your father. So they went to the father's house, and he was like in tears. He hadn't seen her since she was a little girl. Now she was 14 years later. And he remembered the story, and he felt so bad. He goes, no, it's okay. That's what God wanted. And he says, that was the experience of my life. We got married. That was the experience of my life that set me back on becoming religious once more. Now, back to the story of an apartment. We moved in to my mother-in-law's house when we got married. And after a year of living with my in-laws, I said to my wife, the lady with the scars and all that, you know, maybe it's time we rented our own place. I feel like we're imposing on your parents. And she says, don't you worry about it. It's taken care of. I said, what do you mean? He says, you know, after that episode, my parents sued the insurance company with the hall. They got 5 million shekels. There's a $4 million apartment waiting for us on King George. 3-bedroom apartments. And it's waiting for us. It was just a matter of time. It had been being rented, but we can now take over, and they moved right in. So he says to the fellow guys in the back, you're worried about getting an apartment? Ribbon Shalom, the master of the world, can do anything. All you have to do is just show that you care for him. Today's Tu B'Av. Today's a great day. Tu B'Av was a day in which we're considered one of the greatest days in our existence as a nation. The Mishnah tells us that all maidens would go out dressed in white and they would lend to each other. If the poor girl didn't have a white dress, she got it from the rich girl, and the rich girl would wear the poor girl's dress so that they would all look alike. It's my wish to everyone here that Tu B'Av should be a great day for all of you, in which we'll start the Yeshua and salvation for each and every one of you. You should get married to your soulmates and find them easily and quickly and build wonderful Jewish homes. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm now opening up the floor to Q&A.